Well, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Papa's Workshop. Season for Adam, Brady, Luke, and Brenna, and all those others that like seeing an old man make sawdust. Let's check in with my assistant. Not assistant yet, an apprentice. She's got to work her way up. Hold on. There she is. Are you ready for your treat? No, you got to sit. You got to stay there. That's a good girl. All right, let's get to work. All right, so I finished putting all the white plastic on. That's where we left off last time. And so now we're going to start on the runners. And I milled up the stock, joiner, planer, joiner saw. So they're all the right size. I cut them a little over length. We'll do the fine tuning of the length once the pie sections are done. And my apprentice is causing trouble. Hold on. All right. So I got these all milled up. These are gonna slide in here. I do have an adjustable stop. I'll show you that a little bit later. But these are purposely loose. We're going to have 2 strips of this white plastic on either side. We got to cut a groove for these to go in. And so we want the pie sections to rest on the top here. And we're going to use these primarily for 2 reasons. One, the side to side, we're going to make it fairly tight this way. Not super tight because things can change with the wood. But then also to keep the pie sections from being able to lift out, right? So they're going to catch. So even though I had to plane some of this a little bit to make it flat, which means that the grooves in these runners that I had made before, they're still in the, so there's going to be a slight difference between here and there, the distance down for the groove. That's okay because we don't really want it to be, we want it to ride on this, so there needs to be some slop in that direction. So that's my next thing, is to calculate exactly where that groove has got to go, and then how big it's going to be. As like I said, we don't want that tight in the up and down direction. We want it tight in that direction. And as far as the wood movement goes, these 2 are screwed to a piece of plywood, so that should not change much, the distance between there. It's just be how the wood thickness. So we're talking maybe a 64th of an inch from real humidity to real dry, so I don't expect much problems with that. And we're not going to get a lot of movement out of this either, just because the distance is so small by the time I put the groove in. So I think we're good. So let me show you my stops. Just a simple screw. If we can zoom in there a little bit. Let's see. I just have a screw. It can go all the way flush or out. We'll set it to about a 1/4 inch. And that'll be the fine tuning when we get to the pie sections. Before we actually set our bearing underneath for the cam part, we got to get all the pie sections to come together right. Then we'll position the cam, the bearing for the cam. So let's cut a groove. All right, I got the grooves cut in all of these, and of course I got all the plastic stuff cut. So let's go over here. Sorry about that. So that's kind of what it'll look like. So we got that in there, and that'll slide in there. See, there's just a little bit of wiggle, not much. That's just about what we need. So now we need to go ahead and make some recesses for screws to go in there. Screw that on there. and then we can start thinking about the top. All right, before assembling these, I'm going to break the edges of the white plastic, the corners. I'll get that done real quick. All right, getting ready to cut out the pie sections on the plywood. So I got two 90s. I don't know how well that shows up, but each corner's got a 90. And then I've got three 45s. So I got to have another piece to do the fourth 45. So then I'll have a total of 8 45s. But the big leaves, the 90s, those are the ones that move farther than the rest. So I'm just going to use a jigsaw, cut these out, and then get them in manageable pieces, and then I can straighten the edge with the table saw, and then they'll be ready for veneer. All right, here's the veneer that I had got. This is a mahogany crotch, and I've got just enough. I've got 8 layers. So just enough for the pie sections. And here's a view of the mirror trick that I used. I showed this in the first episode on the little prototype table I made in 2012 or 13, something like that. And you can see it's got different designs, and if you rotate the mirrors around, you can see all the different patterns. So we're going to use that same technique here to see how this looks. So we're going to put the mirror in there, and we kind of can see what this is going to look like. And rather than run the veneer right to the edge of the pie, I'm worried that it's going to get, even though it would be well glued, it would get caught and chip. I'm going to put a solid wood border around it all. So we're going to have something that looks like, let's do, something that'll look like that. And then a curved piece around the outside that's, I don't know, we'll see. I don't have enough material to do the leaves with this, but I do have some other. It's not the figured so much, but it's this straight piece. I got just enough, I think. Some of them I'm going to have to put 2 together to make it wide enough, but I think I just barely have enough to do all the leaves with that. So I got to cut out the plywood, get it being oversized a little bit. Then after it's veneered, we'll trim it and get ready to put the hardwood on. But this is pretty wrinkly. I don't know how well that shows up. Yeah, there you can see it, pretty wrinkly. So I'm going to have to flatten it. I've got some stuff to do that, but that's going to take several days to get it dry again once it's done that. So I should have started this process earlier, but I've been kind of debating on what pattern I was actually going to use. I looked at different options, but this is kind of what I'm going to decided on. So let's get to work on the plywood. All right, I'm flattening the veneer before we glue it. So this was in the press last night. So you can see this is four layers here, but you can see it's not flat. And the problem with a crotch or a burl is you got end grain in places, right? So it's very brittle. So you got to have it pretty flat before you see that's much better. So we're ready to work on these, and then I've got these paper towels in between to dry it out. So this is been a couple of day process here, so we're ready to flatten the others. And I got some glue ordered that's urea formaldehyde based, so it's a rigid glue, which works better on these the burls and the crotches, at least that's what I'm told. I don't veneer very often, so I'm not an expert, but we're going to get there. So that's it. All right, I've got the figured veneer, the crotch flattened, and I'm ready to glue, but I'm a little apprehensive because I don't have any extra. So what I think I'm going to do is do the leaves, veneer the leaves first, and I've got a little extra of this veneer, so if one gets screwed up, I can redo it. So with that in mind, I've cut the plywood oversize for the leaves, and of course over here I've been having this is a stack of the outside edge, so that'll be a curve out of that. They're a little oversized too, so that's been sitting for about a week. And then this is all the edges for the the outside edges. But for the leaves, what I'm going to do, they have to fold, and these are going to be the middles. And so I'm going to mill this up to get the thickness of the plywood, and then I'm going to do a tongue and groove into the plywood where it's going to split. And so I'm going to put the tongue and groove on both sides of this, glue this all back to get together so it's one long board, then trim them to width more or less. Again, a little extra, but that way I'll get them all in line, and then I'll veneer over that hinge. This is going to support the hinge. I'll just veneer over that whole thing, and then when it's all said and done, we can cut it in half, right where the seam is. Does that make sense? So I got to mill these up, get them the right size. All right, I have a tongue and groove set, a router bit set. So we've got the groove and the tongue. So these will go together like this. Can get that in there. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and glue those up, and then we can put the veneer over the whole thing, and then we'll split it in half when it comes time to do that. All right, here we are the next morning. We got these all glued, and so now I just have to take this just like maybe a 64th of an inch. I got to take off on these, so I'm just going to plane them. Taking a really light pass. So you get these little whispery things. I don't want to cut into the plywood. I just want to get it. Looks pretty good. I just got to do that on all of them. All right, we got all of the leaf blanks veneered. You can see where the joint is. So when it comes time, we will cut that right there, install the hinge, and then we just have a plain cherry veneer on the back side. And then these will have to be cut kind of, that's roughly where this particular piece, and then the center pieces are going to be cut like that. So these are going to be sitting until we get the pie sections actually mounted on the table, and we can actually get our exact width right, and then we'll start trimming these. But in fact, I'll probably cut these and put the hinges on first, be able to trim the edge flush all the way to reduce any chance that I'm offset on the hinges. So we're there. All right, I'm getting ready to glue the veneer on. So I've cut them up into our 45-degree pie sections. So this would get directly glued to one of the 45 sections. There's 4 of those, but I've got the two end pieces that move out farther on the table are at 90-degree sections. Now I'm going to put a trim, a hardwood edge on these cherry. So I need to make this 90-degree piece, which is going to be 2 of these, look like it's got a strip in the middle. So it's going to be like that. I don't know, you probably can't see it. I took a magic marker, made the edges black so that I can see it when it's, we'll make a small slit across all of this, and the piece that's going to go out here, to make it look like 2 separate pieces, even though it's one. We want it to match the rest of the and I was careful. There's sort of a curve to this pattern, and I've done it in such a way in pairs all the way around, so it is going to look right. So right now I just need to take some more of this veneer tape and tape these guys together into a one piece, and then I'll be ready to glue that up. All right, so we got that done. So now we need to trim it to fit our plywood. We'll need a little bit of extra around. I want to line up this point with the center line. This one there. Yeah, it should be good. So then we just take a knife here and just go around the outside. All right, here is that piece in my homemade vacuum bag. I'm just doing one 90-section piece at a time, and then 2 of the 45s. Just, I'm a little leery of the working time of the glue, so just do it in those shifts. It has to cure at 70 degrees minimum, so my basement shop's a little less than that, so I got these heating pads on there. Just I'll set on low to get there. So as soon as that gets up over 20, it's almost there, I'll turn the vacuum pump off and let it sit. It's supposed to be 4 to 6 hours, but this is late in the day, so it'll probably just sit there overnight. And then we'll do the next one. All right, I got them all the veneer glued. I'm sorry I forgot to film. I trimmed the excess off the edges. So now I got to get the veneer tape off there. That's just stuck on there with you wet the tape. So all I got to do is just get it wet, soak it a little bit, and then kind of pull it up. then we can fine tune the edges before we put the strips on. So that's kind of what it would look like. Of course, there would be another strip there, like that. So we're getting there. All right, we got all the tape off, so and I plan to take a little bit off of each edge. You know, sometimes it's hard to get the good glue bond right there on the edge, but I have this one, it moved. See, I'm not on the corner. It should line up right with this point. So I'm going to have to recut this one at an oddball angle. So I've got to take one of the 45s that I got that I measured. It's right at 45, so I can set that on the line and then mark where that line has to be. Not going to show up real well on this dark wood, but and then the same thing with this edge. I can get that lined up right with that line. And just to leave that off of that. So let me see if I can figure out how many degrees that is. Then I'll recut it on the table saw. All right, I've cut one edge, and so if I bring this right there, see, right there, it's pretty much right on. That was less than, it was about maybe 3/4 of a degree, maybe a little bit less. So now we'll just make the other side 90, and then we'll trim the others. All right, I got them all trimmed, and we got a pretty good fit of all the corners, so we are ready to add our strips. So we got to go through the joiner planer and this table saw and get them all to size. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a tongue and groove, so there'll be a groove on this edge and a tongue on the pieces, and we'll just glue them to each edge. And of course we'll have to miter them out in the front. All right, I got all the edges milled up, so now we're ready to do the tongue and groove. And so I've done that on the pie sections. I think if you can see that. That's our groove. But for the 45-degree sections, we need to make this pair, the two pairs that are in between, look like this. So we need to glue these two guys in and then trim it flush, and then I'll run make the tongue all the way through it. So we're going to go ahead and install these. So I've done the groove on just this one side, not the other side, until we get these glued in. So now we need to make the tongue part on these guys. All right, and this is how I get the tongue lined up, is I've got this little block in the slot, and then it should just fit in there, and it just does. Now I made the edges a little fat so that I can plane it down flush, because it's, things Machines are pretty good at being perfect, but they're not perfect. And, you know, whether the board is moves a little bit or warps a little bit, sometimes there's, you know, it's, I don't want it below the surface. That is the bottom line. I'd rather do the extra work of planing it smooth than take a chance that it gets below this and then I am screwed, because the veneer is very thin and we can't make it up. So what I've done is I've put a shim. I got 2 shims under this to raise up what I need to make this. And then I'll make a test cut and make sure we're centered, if that makes sense. All right, we just glued the 2 strips on our 90-degree sections. So that's what it's going to look like. And last night I did the edges, one edge on the 45. So now we need to put our groove all the way through, and then these 4 strips here will get the tenon part cut, and we'll glue those. All right, we got the edging all glued on. That's what it's going to look like from above, and so you can't really tell which ones are the 90s and which ones are the 45s. So right there we are, that's a 90. So that's the way it's going to look. So I got to take a hand plane to get this flush, and then we've got to do the piece on the outside. But I think this is a good place to stop. I probably got about 30 minutes of video. So until next time, we'll make some more sawdust.